Hi, welcome to the Men's Forum. I'm your host, Gary Costanza. And a couple of recent rulings in the New York State court system have gotten us, spurred us on to do a show on what's happening in the court system. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host, John McGrath. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gary. Great to be here again.
First off, just recently, a new grandparents' law was signed into law by Governor Pataki, and we'll discuss the good and the bad of that. You know, how that affects men and women and our children, and also another ruling also got us fired up that we'll try to sort out also. In that case, a judge was thrown off a case of a woman who was denied representation, and things are happening with that. New issues have arisen because of that case.
Right, Gary. That was in the family court, as a matter of fact, and I believe that judge was the senior judge in the family court system. And I think in that case, if I'm not mistaken, it was in a newspaper. He violated that person's rights to due process of law, and took it upon himself to make a ruling which was above the boundaries of the law, which is what he's supposed to be operating under. And this is one instance, another instance I should say, because this is not the first time we've heard of this. There's been a lot of problems with judges who think that they're above the law and acting on their own merit to make decisions that affect people's lives without justification. So
it is so common, but it can happen to anybody. You're exactly right, man or woman. It does happen to both.
Right, but it shouldn't be happening at all, and that's the problem.
Right, exactly.
And there's been a lot of corruption that's been discovered in the court system and brought into the public eye as of late over the last few months. You've heard naturally the case about Judge Garson in Brooklyn taking bribes in matrimonial cases in the Supreme Court, and then that was just a trickle-down effect. There was a domino effect that took place after that, and more cases are being brought to light as a result of that one. Apparently, out here in Suffolk County, where we preside, there's a lot of that going on as well. But it's not just the court system. It starts with our local government, and it's right down from the county executive's office all the way up to the Supreme Court in our district. And it's got to stop.
Well, I'm glad in this case that the judge was removed. So this woman is going to get a fair deal as far as that.
Right, but what happens to this judge now? That's what I want to know. He was removed from the case. What happens to him? There's a commission called the Commission on Judicial Conduct, okay, who's supposed to reprimand or discipline judges for misconduct. That is misconduct. Now, where's this judge? This judge on another bench? Is he off of this case and sitting on somebody else's case? You know what? I don't think that if a judge does something immoral or unethical, okay, my personal opinion is they should be removed from the system altogether. They shouldn't be removed from this case and put on another case, because you know what? He's already proved that you can't be trusted.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is, and our system was based on trust, okay? Litigants are vulnerable when they walk into a courtroom. They have to rely on the truth and the honesty of a judge, and their attorney representing them, okay? And it's not happening.
See, I will do some further research into this case, but what grabbed my attention was that what happened was that she wasn't afforded representation, so she went the case went ahead without her having a lawyer. But the crux of the problem was that she wasn't giving her ex-husband visitation. And the judge, obviously fed up or at his wit's end of maybe stalling tactics, maybe not. Supposedly the lawyer had a broken foot. But the point is, though, he told her, if you don't give the father visitation, I'm going to sentence you to 6 months in jail.
That's right. Well,
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I wrote down in my notes here, God forbid a judge tries to help a father.
Well, that's a good point too, Gary.
So now, since he tried to help a father, throw him off the case. God forbid that should
Yeah,
happen.
but it wasn't because he was trying to help a father, okay? The judge, and we have to keep that in mind. We have to bear in mind the simple fact that
Right.
the judges are supposed to be operating under the color of the law, okay?
Right.
And within the scope of those boundaries is where their jurisdiction lies, okay? And it shouldn't be a question of whether or not, and I agree with you, don't get me wrong.
I know
agree
you do.
100%
I know you do.
that interfering with visitation, that's wrong, and that should be tried. That issue should be tried. But where that judge crossed the line was that he threatened this litigant with jail time, okay, and literally forced her to proceed
Without
in
a
a
law.
case. It's due process of law, right?
Yeah.
You have a right. That's a constitutional right. You have a right to representation, and he violated that right.
But I may be a little too sensitive because maybe I have heard too many stories of men going to court, taking a day off, and the ex-wife doesn't show. Time and time again. The ex-wife's lawyer didn't show.
Right, well, that is a stall
Being
tactic,
put
like
off,
you stated.
stalling,
Sure.
stalling, and of course, you know, most of the time, the ex-husband is made to pay for this woman's lawyer or this woman's time.
Of course. Well, that's a valid point, too,
Right.
Gary. I mean, that is a stall tactic, like you mentioned.
So I'm imagining that happening, and I'm also reading the fact that she wasn't allowing the father to see the children. So finally, this judge took it upon himself to say, wait a minute, I'm tired of this. This is not right. If you don't give him visitation, you will go to jail. Now, that's the point I like.
Right, and that's the law. But that is the law, and right, you have to stand behind that 100%.
When does that ever happen?
Without a
Never.
doubt. Well, it should happen all the time, and this is the problem with the New York State court system, all right? Because a lot of these judges, you have to remember too now, our court system in Suffolk County, and I guess Nassau County holds true too, but basically it's almost a general statement that I'll make that our court system has a very liberal Republican point of view, okay? And right here in Suffolk County, in our own backyard, from the county executive's office, and this is public knowledge. I mean, I'm not telling you anything that nobody hasn't heard before. It's been in the news. We've had people, elected officials, being arrested and charged with crimes, okay? And we have one who's also running for the county executive's office right now. And you know what? He is the accountant for the county.
I know.
He's the accountant for the county, and the DA tried to press charges against him, okay? And they couldn't do it because, and this is where I have a problem. The DA says, well, we can't indict him on criminal charges because the bookkeeping, the records in his office was so out of whack and so horrendous that we couldn't make heads or tails of where the money. Well, guess what? You know what? Isn't that a contradictory statement? What's the guy's job? The guy's job is to keep accurate records, okay?
Exactly.
And this guy, Romaine, who is the county clerk, is the guy now who's running for county executive office.
Well, that's
okay?
whose head should roll.
Right.
If he was in charge of that.
And he also is naturally part of that Republican Party.
Right.
So,
well, we have to root out this corruption.
So we got right. It's time. You know, it's time that we start putting placing votes for Democratic officials. Okay. Levy is running for that office as well, and his campaign ads are on public TV every day. And the first thing he states is he addresses the corruption issue, and that's where we got to start right here in our backyard from a local issue, from local government, and we'll work it right up to the state. See, last year we started out backwards. We went right to Albany, and we wound up back here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, we have to start. We got to start at home. You got to crawl before you can walk.
Local.
So we start in our local government and we work our way up. Okay. And then maybe a lot of these, it'll have that domino effect. Okay. And things will start to happen. Okay.
We hope so.
The New York State courts have to realize that they have to operate within the federal boundaries of our federal Constitution, okay? And our federal government will stand behind that in all 50 states of this union, okay?
Very good. Now back to this case. Also, we've made this point hundreds of times. Also, the parent who's uncooperative, in other words, the parent who doesn't allow the child to see the other parent, should be declared unfit, or at least is not looking out for the best interest of the child.
That's right, and should at least be brought in front of a judge, in front of a courtroom, on record, and charged criminally and tried. and had a hearing on that issue.
What should happen is that parent should be made to do right by the child, and if time and time again that mother refuses to allow the father to see the child, then she should lose custody.
That's right, but because of political opinion and political persuasion and standpoints, okay, that's not happening.
Well, that's what happened in this case. This woman was in court to show that she should have sole custody, and I believe she was trying to prove that the father shouldn't see the child because she wasn't letting the child see the father.
Well, you need to have a hearing of fact to establish that, and I don't want to pick a side in that matter,
right?
Because
we don't know exactly.
In all due fairness, right?
We don't know.
We don't know all the facts of that case,
exactly.
But
we don't know if he's a fit father or not. But
right, and the mother may even be a whack job.
Right.
But you know what?
Exactly.
She's still.
You know that happens very often.
But she's still a litigant, and she's still entitled under the color of the law.
We know that. Yes.
To due process.
Exactly.
Okay. And the judge should have done the right thing and could have rescheduled that. You know, first of all, they go into court and they do this. They use this stall tactics.
Justice is slow. I agree.
Right. The judge. Well, we got to speed up justice a little bit because the judge will give a new court date of maybe 3 to 6 months. That's nonsense. In this instant, legitimately.
In the meantime, the father's not seeing the child, and the child support is accruing.
That's right. But that's the sad part because the children are deprived of their parents.
Exactly.
Okay. We're talking about the parents' rights. What about the children? They don't have rights in the court system. Yep. All they know is they have at least one parent removed from their life. Okay, this is not a healthy environment
not
for the children.
All. It's been proven.
Right, and the courts are not helping the situation any by not speeding up the process in this matter. Okay, so that needs to be addressed. Now, in this case, supposedly the attorney had fallen down the stairs and broken his leg. Well, you know what? I think if you get the guy in, he should be up and with some medication and a couple of days rest, the swelling to go down. He could be back into court with a cast on his leg within a week.
I'm sure he could have made it.
They can address the issue. And if you know what, if he's lying that he didn't break his leg, that this was just a scam or an excuse to get, like you said, a stall tactic to get the case postponed for a later date, for 2-3 months later. Well, you know what? Let's see his medical records. Let's see if he doesn't still have a cast on in 3 months.
Very good.
Let's charge him criminally.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's start enforcing. Well, let's get the courts and the judges to start doing the right thing.
The right thing.
The truthful thing. The trustworthy thing. And start enforcing the laws that we have on record. Okay?
Yeah. No more BS. I like that. Very good. In other words, no. Of course shouldn't have happened. Of course, but if this is a stalling tactic, heads should roll. And
somebody's got to be held accountable.
If time and time again she's been going to court without a lawyer, or time and time again she refuses to allow visitation, she's got to pay for it.
Right. Naturally,
put her in jail with fathers who are in jail because of child support.
Right. Naturally, there are, I'm sure, allowances. There's a schedule. When you go into Supreme Court, family court, you have a schedule of things that they have a timeline of events that are supposed to take place. And what behoves me is that in the Supreme Court, supposedly your divorce is supposed to take between 12 and 15 months. But you've got cases that are going on from anywhere from 3 to 8 years.
Right. Okay.
Because of what, motion practice, or things come up, postponements, adjournments. No, you have to, like I said, it's all about enforcing the laws and enforcing the system, and the judges have to be held accountable as much as the attorneys do. The attorneys will use that tactic because there's a little bit of leeway, and the attorneys will use that for leverage to their advantage to try to get time to try to put pressure on the other party or create hardship. It's a breakdown tactic to try to get the other party to cave in to accommodate them with their demands. Okay, and to a certain degree, okay. All's fair in love and war, so to speak. But you know what? This is a court of law. This isn't a game, and there are people's lives at stake here.
Exactly.
And when you start throwing children into the mix, okay?
That's serious.
It's very serious.
That's not a game. Human tragedy.
It's not a game anymore. Yeah. It's not a game. It's got to be addressed.
So, John, what do you think about this new grandparents' law?
You know what? Under the scope of why they voted this thing into law, why this law came about, I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing, and a simple reason. What happens is, I think it's a good thing for the simple reason that they want to keep children from being lost to the foster care system unnecessarily, okay, when they have biological families still available to them.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why this law was originally set up for that purpose. But there's like anything else in every law. There's
always an exception.
There's a back door that's always open,
Yeah.
and there's some dangerous implications that could be found as a result of this law. Okay, because this law was basically to protect the children. The idea is to protect the children in the event that, let's say, the parent, the custodial parent, gets killed. Look what happened in September 11th, when so many children wound up parentless and homeless because one or both of their parents were lost to a tragedy, a tragic event. It could be an accident, could be a plane crash. There's even cases where there's a parent, a custodial parent is incarcerated for some reason. Well, there was one instance where there was a child who was left in a home for 3 days, for I think 3 weeks, a 3-year-old child, and they found a child in the house was eating ketchup and rice out of a box. There was no food in the house, and this child ate what it could reach, basically. Okay,
Yep.
and there was so a child like that needed to be rescued. Okay, and what would happen was that child would go right to the foster care system. Okay, rather than, nobody knew the parent the parent died. Parent was deceased. Now, rather than just send the kid into foster care and adopt the child away, let's try to locate the family.
Exactly.
You know, the bloodlines.
These laws should be flexible in that way.
Right.
In
they
other
have
words,
to be. And I pray to God that they will be.
I mean,
this instance.
of course, biological parents should have the most rights to their children.
Right.
But other family members should also have some rights on a case-by-case basis.
Right. Well, in an instance where, see, that is the other side of the coin. That is where the other problem arises. Let's say, and I'm not saying the custodial parent is a mother or a father, okay?
Right.
But you know what? Somebody in New York State, being that we don't have a shared parenting state here, and we're still trying to push this legislation, and this is very good reason. If any, it's probably the best reason why we should have shared parenting laws in New York State is for that sole reason alone, to protect the children. Okay, you're going to give the New York State is going to award the custody of the child to one parent. That knocks the other parent out of the so-called.
Not only the other parent, but the other parent's parents, the other grandparents.
The whole family.
Exactly.
The whole family.
The whole side.
There's aunts, there's uncles, there's godparents, godmother, godfather,
Exactly.
there's cousins, there's a whole.
And for that reason, in this case, the case that made the precedent here for this law, the woman had custody, and the woman's parents ended up taking care of this child, probably for the majority of the time, and that's why this poor child was so lost without the mother when she did die, and then, of course, the grandparents when the child went over to the father.
Right. Now, that's a good point, too, because I think there was a lengthy period of time, because what I was leading up to was the fact that, first of all, if there's another parent involved in the picture, a visiting parent, because of the shared parenting regulations, okay? And I'm going to use my own self as an example. If my children were awarded to my wife, and something had happened to her, and say she's living, with her parents, and say she died or she was doing crack,
just like what happened here.
She was out on a prostitution thing, and
exactly.
And got her throat slashed one night by her John,
exactly.
Which is probably likely, to happen. But we're not going to go there. But
that's another show.
Right. That's another show. Okay. Now, I'm available as a parent,
exactly.
Even though I'm not awarded custody, okay? I'm still the visiting parent, and I'm the biological parent. Well, you know what? You can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to petition the court for custody of those children as a result of that incident. But what's happening is, what we don't want to happen is that because the custodial parent was living with, say, her parents, that they're going to assume that the child is going to stay in that environment
exactly.
and stay with those parents because they're the wife's parents.
And exactly that sole custody thing, that's what caused this. Because in that case, I wrote that down here, okay? The kids were living with the grandparents or may live with grandparents for a number of different reasons, economic hardship, substance abuse problems, death, illness, neglect. Okay? When those serious problems are visited on the custodial parent, guess what? They shouldn't be the custodial parent.
That's right.
When a mother or father, whoever's the custodial parent, can't afford to take care of the child, has a mental illness, has a drug problem, alcohol problem, they should lose custody. Custody should go to the more fit parent. In this case, it would have been the father.
All right. Well,
then we wouldn't have had grandparents taking care of a child.
That's right. That's a gray area that's filling in here. See, the grandparent law, like I said, the intention was good.
Mm-hmm.
The intention was to
Right.
rescue the children from the foster care system. But like you said, in a case where there's drug addiction, prostitution, okay, that's an unfit parent.
I mean, almost every day you read a story about that happening,
That's
a
right.
child being killed because of neglect, because the custodial parent was a wacko, not there, left, like you just said, left the kid locked up for 3 weeks. And I always say, where was the father? And they don't even mention the father.
Right. So it's a case of
They
whether...
should have sought out the father
Right, now
when there was a first sign of a problem.
Right, now there's two problems. I know two problems where that father is, okay? One, he might not have been married to her. Okay, so they're gonna, that's a gray area.
Well, actually, I think that was, I'm not sure about this case.
Okay, but still, but you know
yeah.
what? He's still he's biologically, he's the father. And unless he's not a part of that child's life, okay, he had better have rights to custody of those children.
Yeah.
Under that law.
See,
okay?
also, you're exactly right. The grandparents' law it was very well-meaning, and it can help a lot of people. But now, that also makes them be the adversary with the remaining parent as to who gets sole custody, the grandparents or the father. It should be shared parenting among all the people involved.
Well, right.
Right?
The children, well, and that's, again, we wouldn't even need this law if we had a shared parenting law where the children were spending equal time with both parents, then both parents would be involved with the children's lives,
Right,
okay?
right.
But New York State likes to point one parent against the other parent and create an ugly war in the courtroom over the children and then stand back and claim and contradict themselves
Yeah.
and claim that it's in the best interest of the children.
we know it's not.
That we think, and it's not. It's
What's
clear.
happening is the child is being ripped out of the arms of one parent, and that parent gets alienated.
But you know what? In reality, he's getting ripped out of the arms of both parents, okay? Because both parents cannot think and act in the best interest of the children, okay? The custodial
Right.
parent or just as
Exactly.
well as the non-custodial
That's
parent.
not fair for the
because
custodial parent.
It's creating an unhealthy environment, period.
Exactly. That's
Okay?
too much
There's
for the
no way
custodial
There's
parent.
no way they can justify that. And until our colleagues get this legislation passed, you know, this is the law that we're going to have to deal with. This is the
All right.
situation that we have in our
Very
court.
good. John, we got to wrap it up. Any final comments? Anything you want to say? To our viewers, maybe coming up election day or?
Yeah, like I said, there's been enough, it is election time, and there's been enough corruption in our local government. And if, you know, it's hard to be an advocate and get out every day and go out and fight for people's rights, for parents' rights, our children's rights, to fight our system, our bureaucracies. And it's hard for people to donate their time as much as we do, okay? And we do this every day of the week. 24 hours, 7 days a week. We're on call and we're available. When there's local events, we're there. All I ask is that you contribute, and you do that by placing a vote come November at this election, because that vote is going to carry a lot of weight, and it's time to make a change. It's time. We have the control. We have the power. We have to vote these people out.
Very good. Thank you, John. I just want to mention also the Town of Brookhaven Women's Services is offering a support group for men. It starts October 20th. When you view this, you might be a few days late, but let me give you the phone number anyway. You could still get in with that support group. It's 631-698-2074. And please, if you need any help with a men's support group, I highly recommend it. I want to say good night from all of us here at the Men's Forum. Take care.